In this video I want to talk about minimal and maximal software, or rather minimalist and maximalist software. But that's kind of a long, complicated title, so I decided on minimal and maximal. And what I mean is like two kinds of software. So, and the most obvious examples of this are VI and Emacs. And that's also what the what the pictures here of the machete and the multi-tool represent. I mean, if you know that meme, yeah, that's where I took them from. So on the left we have the machete, which does one thing as VI, and it's kind of minimalist. And on the right we have the multi-tool, which kind of does everything as Emacs does, and you could say it's kind of maximalist. So yeah, that's what I want to talk about. And there's quite a bit of stuff I think to talk about, and these are just gonna be my thoughts. So yeah. VI and Emacs, minimal and maximal software. Yeah, so the first thing that obviously comes to mind is the Unix, kind of the Unix philosophy. Do one thing and do it well. And there you of course have to ask, okay, what's like one thing? So is the MADI email server minimal? Is DWM minimal? Do they do one thing? And because a thing that has been like criticized of DWM is, well, it's not really minimalist because it adds its own status bar with the workspaces and stuff, and that's kind of not minimalist, because you can have a window manager which only manages Windows, and then you can have a status bar as a like separate thing, a separate piece of software. And that's kind of real minimalism, because then you have software which really only does one thing. And yeah, so you have to ask, what's one thing? Like, what's the definition here? And rather, how highly abstracted should minimal software be? So, and also when we talk about like the MADI email server, is the MADI email server doing one thing? Because you can have like a suite of software like Postfix and Dovecot and OpenDKIM and all that stuff, and they all kind of do like, they're kind of like more doing one thing than MADI is. But at the same time, like MADI is a complete email server. And when you think of an email server, you think of it as like one thing. And the same with a window manager. You think of a window manager like as one thing. And with that comes key bindings and also status bar and also managing windows. So is breaking that up like kind of is that hurting the minimalist aspect of it? So yeah, how highly abstracted should minimal software be, or can it be, really? That is, I think, an important question, because depending on the answer, it kind of it depends on this question what you would consider minimalist. Even though, I mean, this whole topic is like kind of irrelevant anyways, because who cares what you consider or what I consider minimalist? I mean, it doesn't really matter. But okay, it's still an interesting thing to think about. So I think, as I said in the beginning, like VI is minimal. VI does text editing, and that's the only thing it does, and it does that really, really great. I think, but it doesn't do much else. So you can edit text with it, but like VI out of the box doesn't do much else. And of course, I mean, VI is minimal, and I mean, and Vim and whatnot. I mean, you can say Vim or VI, but I like VI because it's even more minimal than Vim. But often Vim setups are not minimal. Like, they include a file browser, they include auto-completion and integrated shell, auto-compilation, syntax highlighting, and all this stuff. Like having like window splitting and all this stuff. Like, and I mean, that's not kind of minimal, because at that point you're not only concerned about editing text, but about a whole suite of other operations, like managing files and stuff like that. So you can't really consider this minimal. And also you have to ask, is a file browser plugin or any other plugin for Vim doing one thing? Oh, that's kind of wrong English here. Do one thing. But anyways, like, is it doing one thing? And not really, because it's kind of only doing this one thing as a VI or Vim plugin, rather. So it's not like an LS which does one thing independent of everything else. So yeah, And this comes to the point that minimal software sometimes, well, often doesn't suffice, because stuff is like complex, and to do complex stuff you need to use, well, complex software. Because copying a file is simple, so the copy command like cp is like pretty simple, and it should be simple because you're only copying a file. But editing text really isn't simple, because there is just a lot of stuff to consider if you think about it. And well, editing text is more complex than copying a file for sure, and that's why VI is more complex than the copy command maybe. But I mean, and when I say here editing text, I mean editing text. But if you then think about like developing software, actually, developing software is not only editing text. It just isn't. Like, you have to like have a development environment, which includes many things. Like, for example, syntax highlighting. Like, for example, maybe built-in documentation, like a REPL probably. Some kind of compilation step, like some kind of even what's it called, like something like power edit, where you're not only editing text, but you're editing the structure of your programming language, which is much more than editing text. You kind of abstract the text aspect of it away, and you're now, like, if you're editing like scheme code or list code in general, you're now editing like what's it called, sexp, you know what I mean. You're now editing like parentheses and these pairs and stuff like that. So there really is much more to it. And this all comes down to that you need a good framework for feature integration for this. And I think, because if you don't have that framework, it's just kind of a mess. And if you don't have parts that work well together, like for example, quote unquote Unix tools like ls, cp, move, like all the stuff, sed, awk, which all can be glued together with like the pipe and with the shell and stuff like that. So you need some good framework like this in all software for feature integration. And again, I don't think VI or Vim is that great at that, but Emacs is great at feature integration, and that's why Emacs is so popular, and there's so many extensions for Emacs, because it's just great at feature integration. It has automatically built-in documentation, and I mean, it's a Lisp, or it uses a Lisp, and all the pros that come with that. And yeah, there are many more reasons, of course, but these are the ones that are at the top of my head. And so yeah, my usage normally, and there's another spelling error, normally is I use VI as is. Like, I use it on servers to edit configuration files and stuff like that, or also for quick scripts, of course. So I don't try to extend VI or Vim or whatever. But I use Emacs and extend it for more complex features. So if I'm actually programming, I will use Emacs. Like, if I have a project and I need to write stuff and test it out, I'm not gonna pull up VI every time and write :W to write and then switch to my other window and then compile the stuff. Yeah, that's what a extensible text editor is for, I think. Alright, so when you're building stuff, bricks should be bricks. So bricks, and if you think of a brick is super simple. A brick is not complex, and because of that you can build stuff with it. You can't build stuff with like complex stuff. That's kind of hard. So I think bricks should be as simple as possible. And that's really what all this boils down to. Because if you have minimal software or minimal tools, you can easily like glue them together, as I said, with like something like the shell. You can glue all these tools together, like a cat, a grep, a tr, awk, sed, etc., because they do one thing and do it well, and you can easily build more complex stuff with that. And you can't really do that with like complex tools, especially, I mean, if you think of like Windows or something, how are you gonna glue together GUI programs? You can't. Like, it doesn't work. You're not gonna have a like well put together, glued together workflow just like you wanted with like like the Microsoft Office suite or like Adobe or something. And I mean, they all have their own like solutions, quote unquote, to the stuff where you can, I think you can have like a file in Photoshop, and then you can automatically import it into whatever, some other Adobe software and all this. So they try to do like more complex workflows, but I mean, if you've ever done shell scripting, you know how easy it is to do this stuff with these simple programs, because they do one thing and do it well. They are bricks, and you can build very complex stuff out of them. So yeah, I mean, if you've done like shell scripting for any amount of time, you've probably built like long pipelines of like programs which all feed into each other. And I mean, yeah, it's super easy, and I think all of this boils down to these programs being super simple. All right, so Emacs does 1,000 things, of course, because, well, one thing, editing text, or rather all that comes after editing text or that goes along with it, like, for example, programming or also writing and stuff like that. I mean, that's complex. But also because Emacs is, of course, not just a text editor, but rather a complete interface to, well, it can be an interface for most computing tasks. And I don't really think, well, should it be, should it not be? I mean, that's another question, of course. I mean, should you use Emacs as your window manager? I don't know. I've tried that, but yeah, I think there's software that's better at that. But I mean, it does 1,000 things, yeah, sure. But Emacs is not a brick. You're not trying to build anything out of Emacs in terms of a pipeline workflow or something like that. You're not piping stuff into the Emacs process. So it doesn't really interact with anything. Well, with any other software in the way an LS or a CAT or whatever does, because it's interacting with the user, and that can be that is a very different thing. I think and this really is where you kind of need the maximalist aspect of it, because you as the user want to do a lot of stuff. Like you want to have a file browser, you want to, I don't know, have like power edit and a REPL open and all this stuff. And Emacs integrates all of this very well. All right, let's go to another topic, and that is the web. And I mean, you're seeing where this is going when it comes to maximalist software, because I mean, I shouldn't have maybe written Chromium here. I should have written every browser. Every browser is very, very bloated maximalist software. And that is not by coincidence. I mean, you can't have a minimalist browser in any meaningful sense, because at that point you are just restricting the usage of a browser. So browsers, and Chromium especially, are very bloated and maximalist because it's necessary, because the web is very complex. So the web is not minimal, and it's so complex that you need like software that accommodates all of it, because you just can't restrict it. And that reason is in part because web pages are like living, quote unquote, documents, other than, for example, images or text. And these living documents, you can do, well, a lot of stuff with it. And there are so many possibilities, and there's also such a great possibility to like screw up that you need to have a browser which supports and accommodates pretty much everything. If you want to use it like normally, and you want to browse the like normal quote unquote web. I mean, and there can be an argument for if you should do that, or if that's necessary for like life. But yeah. So and what I mean with you can also screw up, or well, not you, but like web pages, is you can have like text-based browsers, like for example, what's it called, EWW in Emacs, which only display the text of a website. But you know, the modern web is so bloated that most web pages you can't do that with most web pages, because they just have so much stuff going on that you can't even really like computationally maybe so automatically discern the content, because there's just a lot of stuff and the structure is not very clear. So you can structure a web page in like an infinite amount of ways, pretty much. Yeah. So I think the web as it is now just needs maximalist software, and there really is no way of getting around it, I think. All right. So the last thing I want to talk about is programming, because I mean, you can call shell scripting programming if you want to, but yeah, it's I don't think it is really in like the sense I use the word in. And I mean, that's not no value judgment or anything. I think just programming is like something different. And I want to quote here something I think is very true, and that is from the Scheme standard reports. And the Scheme is like a Lisp dialect, if you don't know, yeah, which is a programming language, or rather a family of programming languages. Okay, programming languages, quote, programming languages should be designed not by piling feature on top of feature, but by removing the weaknesses and restrictions that make additional features appear necessary. And I think this is very true. And I also think that that's something we see a lot of nowadays. So not this, the way this is put here, but rather the piling of feature on top of feature. And yeah, we can see this with like modern JavaScript, also modern C++, also Pythons, like all these big mainstream languages kind of do this, I think. And it has like many reasons, I guess. And one of them is probably like syntax. So when it comes to Scheme and Lisp completely remove the like syntactic, maybe what do you call it? Maybe syntactic sugar, if you want to call it that. So because the syntax in like Lisp languages is so simple, you don't have a lot of complexity when it comes to that. And with that comes many benefits, and really enables you to do exactly what is said here: remove weaknesses and restrictions. So I think the best approach for any programming language is to have a lean and small core language, and then have lots of optional extensions to cover every case. Yeah, and this feeds into what I've said before. You want to have like simple bricks, and when you have them, it's easy to build stuff. But if you don't have them, it's kind of, yeah, it gets out of hand very quickly. Yeah. And Emacs is kind of the same, but like really just kind of. I mean, Emacs, like default vanilla Emacs has lots of stuff in it that you don't really need, I think. So it's not like lean in that sense, but it takes this aspect of, okay, let's have like a core program and then just have everything as like extensions and plugins. So yeah, conclusion. I personally use minimalist software wherever applicable and like wherever I can. Like I use VI all the time. I use dblobby, st, dmenu, send. I mean, this presentation is in send. I use pass. I've made a video on that already. Also in programming, I use Scheme because I think it's just the best. And when it comes to building stuff, of course, again, programming is also building stuff. Like building stuff in terms of like shell scripting. I mean, how else are you gonna shell script but with minimalist software? But I also use maximalist software where necessary, like Emacs and Chromium. Because yeah, you can't really get around some of this stuff. I mean, you can't develop for the web if you don't use a bloated web browser. I mean, yeah, that's just how it is. But still, I think you can, of course, use better software when it comes to maximalist software. So I, of course, don't think one should use like proprietary bloated software. I don't think that's good. So there's still a choice when it comes to maximalist software. It's not like good and evil. It's a spectrum, of course. So yeah, I mean, the terms minimal software and maximal software are kind of like throwaway terms, anyways. Because I mean, what's maximal, what's minimal? How do you define those terms? But I still think it's interesting to talk about this stuff and think about it, because it of course also tells you something about your own software usage. Like what kind of software to use when and stuff like that. So yeah, I hope this was interesting. Maybe. And yeah, let me know what you think, of course. I'm interested. What you think of this topic and what software you use. When do you use a minimal web browser and only browse like text, or try to at least. Yeah, I don't really have anything else to say, so I'll leave it at that, and have a nice day.